So imagine it's Mother's Day. You take your grandmother, who happens to be handicapped and needs a ride to the store, over to the local Walmart and you wait for her in a handicap spot. The next thing you know, the cops are knocking on the window of your vehicle and accusing you of faking a need for a handicap spot. Before you know it, they've jerked you out of the car, they've roughed you up, and you're on your way to spending Mother's Day in a jail cell. I didn't make that up. That's what happened to Breshari Faulkner in Senatobia, Mississippi. Let's talk about it. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to Southern Draw Law. My name is James White, criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, former police officer. Let's start out with generosity. Let's assume, for the sake of the argument, that the officer who arrested Miss Faulkner at a Senatobia, Mississippi Walmart for parking improperly in a handicap space, let's give her the strongest argument that the state could possibly make. Now, for my comment section perfectionists who are going to no doubt hear one sentence that I say, and that'll be the only sentence they watch in the video before they run to the comments and say, oh my God, how could you be defending them? I'm not defending them. You have to be able to build the house and show why the foundation is weak before you can tear it down. So that's what I'm doing. So without further ado, let's watch part of the body cam, and then I'll build the best house I can with the shitty carpentry the state has to work with here, and then we'll break away and tear it all down. It's going to be fun.
Hey, I was just checking the placard. I'm seeing whose name it was in and if you were the owner of the placard.
My grandmother, she went in the store.
She went in the store?
Yes, ma'am. I had dropped off. She went in the store, but I can move. I can move.
How'd you drop her off?
I just moved.
Yep. Okay. I need you to see your ID, please. I need your ID, please.
What did I do?
Because you're parking in a handicap and you're not allowed to park here.
Yes, ma'am, but I just said I was going to move. My grandmother, she's handicapped. She's in the store.
Did she come out of this vehicle?
I dropped her off at the other end.
Did she come out of this vehicle?
I dropped her off
Did
at the
she
other
come out of this vehicle? Can I get your ID, please?
I haven't done nothing, ma'am.
No, you're parking into a handicap a vehicle or a parking spot using someone else's.
My grandmother is handicapped. I dropped her off in the store.
How did you get up here with all this stuff in here?
I just moved.
Okay, can I need your ID, please?
I haven't done anything.
You're violating handicap parking violation. Can I see your ID, please?
I haven't done anything.
You have, and I'm requesting your ID, and if I don't get it, I will arrest you. It's just simple. And then your children are not properly in their buckled in their seat.
You gotta unbuckle them. You just sit up here finding a reason to with me.
She doesn't unbuckle them.
I unbuckled them. I was getting ready to get out the damn car.
And you just now parked. I came up right behind you as soon as you parked. You did not turn around and unbuckle them.
Yes, I did. You weren't in here.
Where's your lying to me? You're refusing to identify yourself.
I want a supervisor or something because you feeling real hostile and shit. I need you to get a supervisor because you sitting up here with me for no motherfucking reason.
There's no need.
I need a supervisor because you mess with me for no reason, and I told you I would move. I told you I would move.
No, it's just not that.
Yeah, you mess with me for no reason. I got my kids in here. I do not feel safe with you doing this.
And you're escalating this. You're doing this.
Come on, man. Come on. Do what you gotta do.
Step out here, please. Step out of here.
You can get somebody else here.
Get out of the vehicle now before I make you get out of here. Do you want to do this in front of your children or not?
You said you answered my idea. Just gave me an idea, bro.
Walmart aisle 4. Get out of the vehicle now or I will make you get out.
Sorry. Step out. Oh my God. Why you grabbing me? Why are you grabbing me?
I have one resistance.
Why are you grabbing me, bro? What are you doing?
Get out of the vehicle now.
Just get out.
Get out.
Hands on me. And if you
Get out of the back of the vehicle now.
No, she just
Get
grabbed
to
me.
the back of the
She
vehicle.
just grabbed me. She's gonna be using unnecessary force.
Because you're refusing to look at it across with me. You're okay. Hit me. Hit me now. Negatives, resistance. Grocery side, grocery side. Get up. Ma'am, she's gonna get me tied. I didn't escalate this man, she did. I did not. Give me your hand. Give me this. Give me your arm. Listen to her. No sergeant is on the way. Give me. I have 2 officers on the way. Give me your arm.
She twisted my arm. Y'all help me, please. She twisted me. Please help me.
I said officers are on the way.
Please help me. I don't feel safe with her.
Okay,
She
get back.
grabbed me out my car.
Get back.
She grabbed me out my car. She grabbed me out my car.
Come on, get up.
My kids is in my car.
Come on, get up. What in custody?
Okay, so keep in mind, we are giving them the benefit of the doubt and we are assuming that they're doing things the right way. I know, scary. But let's first start with the officer's legal justification. We are all familiar with Terry versus Ohio. We understand that under that case, police are allowed to stop and briefly detain people if they have reasonable articulable suspicion that criminal activity is afoot. Now, the law in Mississippi that governs handicap violations is 27-1956, and subsection 5 lays out the elements of parking violation and specifically reads as follows. It shall be unlawful to park a motor vehicle in an area set aside for persons who are disabled if the motor vehicle does not have displayed the removable windshield placard authorized in this section with the date of expiration visible. Now, there's a bunch of other like plates and things that you can use in order to have a handicap permit, but this particular one pertains to the placard, so I'm going to stop there under subsection 5. But there is an important part of subsection 5, and that is the punishment part. Any person who unlawfully parks a motor vehicle in such areas or who blocks such spaces or access thereto shall be guilty of a misdemeanor, and upon conviction thereof shall be fined not more than $200 for each such violation. So that means it's a misdemeanor. It means she can be arrested for it. But that doesn't really apply here because Ms. Faulkner has the placard and it's displayed. So we have to look a little further into the code, and we have to go to subsection 9, because what's actually happening here is the officer believes there's an improper, unauthorized use of this placard. And so that is governed by subsection 9. So let's go to that and we'll check it out. So subsection 9 says parking in any area set aside for persons who are disabled is limited to vehicles which immediately before or after the utilization of such an area are used to transport a person with a disability which limits or impairs the ability to walk. But there's a really important part at the bottom here, and it says that people basically who break this law are to be punished pursuant to the terms of subsection 9, which means that their violation of this statute is a misdemeanor arrestable under Mississippi law. So that's the basis for the reasonable articulable suspicion that the officer is going to use. So in the spirit of building the house the best we can for the state, we have to remember what the officer said. She said that she observed the vehicle the whole time and she didn't observe anyone get out of the car. As we know from subsection 9, handicap placards can only be used when the disabled individual is actively being transported. The officer in this case claimed that she observed a woman sitting alone in a parked car in a handicap space and no one exited the vehicle, meaning there's no way, according to the officer, that Ms. Faulkner could have dropped off her grandmother. Based on that, she suspected that the placard had been loaned to Ms. Faulkner, that it belonged to someone else, maybe a relative, maybe not, but more importantly, that Ms. Faulkner was inappropriately using it in order to occupy a handicapped spot when she wasn't authorized to do that. So the officer initiates a stop. Now, under Pennsylvania versus Mimms, once that stop is made, the officer can order the driver to exit the vehicle for officer safety. And if the driver resists, even passively, the officer can escalate. And eventually, we're in the territory of Graham versus Connor, where we have to determine whether the use of force is necessary or reasonable based on 3 key factors. So if you take that legal scaffolding and you assume all the conditions were met, again, you're assuming all of these things that the state is going to say are true. You could argue that the officer had a right to stop the car, a right to demand ID, a right to order her out, and a right to arrest her for resisting when she didn't comply. That's the state's best version of the facts. But here's where it falls apart. I'll refer you back to the language of subsection 9 because it specifically states that the use of handicap spots is limited to vehicles which, immediately before or after the utilization of such an area, meaning the handicap spot, are used to transport a person with a disability which limits or impairs the ability to walk. Now, this matters, and I want to direct your attention to a short part of the interview that Ms. Faulkner had with the sergeant that eventually showed up after she was handcuffed and sitting sort of halfway in the back of his patrol car. Let's watch part of that interview.
Okay. I wasn't trying to, I was just trying to get them on some... Turn sideways and sit. Okay. She grabbed me for no reason. I told her I was getting the ID and she still grabbed me out the car.
So I wasn't here. Can you tell me your name, man?
My name is Breshari Faulkner. She wouldn't even give me time to explain myself.
I'm Sergeant Dover, okay? Explain to me what happened from the get-go. I see you're parked here in the handicap. She talked to you about so what happened?
My son is handicapped and my grandma is. But we was in there. My grandma was in the store, but my auntie was driving her car for her, and I was trying to just bag in and wait for that spot to get open so I could pull over there because my grandma wasn't in the car. And then she came up to my door and she tapped on the door. And then I looked the window down and I was just trying to see who she was. And she said, she was up there finding reasons to mess with me. And then she asked for my ID. And I said, I haven't done nothing. I said, with me just being here, just sitting here, we weren't even out the car, we were just sitting here. I was trying to get my children to calm down. My son was hollering, and I was trying to wait for an open parking spot. And I told her, I said, I'll move. It's not this serious. I said, I'm sorry, I'll move. When I gave her the ID, she told me get out the car, but I haven't done nothing. And I asked for a sergeant multiple times, and she didn't. She waited till she threw me out the ground. She grabbed me out of my car. I wasn't doing, my hands were on the steering wheel. I didn't reach for nothing. I didn't even have nothing in my car. My grandmother right there. That's what I kept telling her. My grandmama is right there with the pink hat on.
Pink hat?
Her name is on the sticker. She's right there. I haven't done shit wrong. My grandma right here. Why would I lie to my grandmama not being the matter?
How are you? I'm Sergeant.
So, plot twist, right? At the end of this interview, we see Grandma for the first time. She is, in fact, a real person, and she is very clearly walking with a cane and very clearly disabled under the meaning of the statute. But importantly, Faulkner said that she was going to pick up her grandmother because her aunt had been driving the grandmother's car. So that means that Faulkner could have been waiting in the parking spot for her grandmother to be done. And in fact, that's probably what she was doing because she was saying that she was getting ready to get out of the vehicle, which is how she justified not having the kids in the seatbelt. She was going to go in there. My assumption is she was going to meet up with her grandmother, come back out, get the vehicle, pick her up at the front door. So remember, that means that in order for Faulkner to commit a crime, the crime of unauthorized use of a handicap placard to occupy a handicap spot, which is a misdemeanor, she had to come into that parking lot and not drop off a handicapped person And she would have had to leave that same parking lot after having parked in the handicap spot and also not pick up a handicapped person either. And that's where this case becomes constitutionally problematic for the undereducated police officer. Remember that reasonable articulable suspicion under Terry is based on what the officer knows at the time of the seizure. And more importantly, it requires articulable facts, not guesses, not gut feelings, facts. And here's the only fact the officer had. She observed a car navigate the parking lot and eventually park in a handicap space. The vehicle had a placard, and it was displayed properly and in compliance with the law. As far as we know, there was no evidence that the placard was fake. There was no report of a stolen placard, no indication that the driver was not the authorized user, nothing. You have to remember, this is all based on what the officer knew at the time. There's no way she could have known anything more. This officer assumed the woman wasn't disabled or wasn't transporting someone who was. And we all know what assuming will do. And based on what she didn't see, she decided that this was suspicious. That's not a fact, that's a hunch. And Terry versus Ohio makes it crystal clear that hunches are not enough. And you got to keep in mind, the only crimes that we are investigating here, and I do use the word investigating very loosely, are violations of Mississippi Code 27-1956, and not subsection 5 because the placard was properly displayed. We are investigating a violation of unauthorized use under subsection 9. And again, subsection 9 allows for the use of that space either directly before or after transporting the disabled person. So in order for the officer to establish something more than a hunch, she would have needed to wait to see what Faulkner did after utilizing the parking space. Or, more reasonably, she could have understood what the law allows and took what Faulkner said at face value until she knew better. Now, the officer needed all this information just for a legal detention. In order to issue a citation, she needs probable cause, which we are never going to get to because it turns out that Faulkner was telling the truth. Because we saw Grandma hobble onto the screen at the end of this interview with the sergeant. And so now what we have is a constitutional collapse. This case has turned into a constitutional catastrophe. Once the detention fails under Terry, everything that follows dies along with it. The ID demand was unlawful because this was not a traffic stop. There's no lights. There's no siren. She has to tap on the window to get the girl's attention. And Faulkner is startled by her presence. The exit order that would be justified under Mimms is no longer justified because Mimms only applies to lawful traffic stops, and this was not a lawful traffic stop. This was a Terry detention, plain and simple, and one based improperly on a hunch. The arrest lacked probable cause at the outset, although we do have to deal separately with the resisting, but we'll get to that in a couple minutes. The use of force may or may not have been an unnecessary escalation. But in order to determine whether the force was excessive, strangely, we have to first assume that the arrest was lawful. Because the way the courts approach this is they say, well, if the arrest was lawful, assuming it was, would the amount of force used to conduct a lawful arrest be reasonable under these circumstances? And then they backtrack. And then once we determine that the amount of force used would be reasonable for a lawful arrest, then we get to go back and look at the case through the lens of, do we have a Fourth Amendment violation for unlawful arrest and excessive force, or just an unlawful arrest? But when we look at the Graham factors, they're pretty straightforward. So let's take a look at those and see how this case lines up. Number 1, severity of the crime. A non-violent parking violation, at most a misdemeanor, again, assuming there was a crime. Number 2, immediate threat. None. She was in her car. She was fairly calm. I mean, she was back talking a little bit. We'll get to that First Amendment stuff in just a minute. But there were children in the back seat of the car. She wasn't going anywhere. She was waiting on her grandmother. Number 3, resistance. Passive. She asked for a supervisor. She delayed getting out, but she complied when she was threatened with a taser. She didn't strike the officer. She didn't push the officer. She didn't run. At worst, she was passively resisting getting out, and then she actively resisted giving her arms up and being handcuffed. Now, just to touch on resisting arrest, specifically in Watkins versus State from 1977, the Mississippi Supreme Court reiterated that an individual may legally resist an unlawful arrest. The court emphasized that the right to resist is grounded in the fundamental right to personal liberty. However, it also noted that the resistance must be reasonable and proportionate to the circumstances. In Boyd versus State, which was a Mississippi case from 1981, The court acknowledged that a person has the right to use reasonable force to resist an unlawful arrest. The court emphasized that the use of force must be necessary under the circumstances, and that deadly force is only justified when there's a reasonable apprehension of death or great bodily harm. And then lastly, Odom versus State, which was a Mississippi Court of Appeals case from 2004. In this case, the Mississippi Court of Appeals recognized that an individual has the right to use reasonable force to resist an unlawful arrest or to aid another in resisting such an arrest. But the court highlighted that this right is limited to reasonable and necessary force under the circumstances. So the takeaway is that you're allowed to use, in Mississippi, reasonable amount of force proportionate to the amount that's being used on you to resist an unlawful arrest. So even though she resisted, that can't be the justification for any sustained charges, in my opinion, because the arrest was unlawful and she had a right to resist under Mississippi case law. And for that, she was dragged out of her car, threatened with a taser, wrestled to the ground, and cuffed like a felon in front of her screaming children on Mother's Day. And that leads us to the actual problem. She was telling the truth, and she didn't get the benefit of the doubt because of the way she looked, I guess, because I'm not saying that because she's black. I'm saying that because that was all the information the officer had to go on. And as she's being arrested, we've got body cam footage showing her elderly grandmother, the one with a disability, hobbling out of Walmart with a cane. The placard was not being misused. There was no crime. And the only reason that any of this went down the way it did is because the officer let her ego replace her lawful and constitutional authority. To prove that, let me direct your attention to the portion of this interaction where this stopped being about a potential handicapped parking violation and converted to contempt of cop.
I need you to get a supervisor because you sitting up here with me for no motherfucking reason.
There's no need.
I need a supervisor because you mess with me for no reason, and I told you I would move. I told you I would move.
No, it's just not that.
Yeah, you mess with me for no reason. I got my kids in here. I do not feel safe with you doing these.
And you're escalating this. You're doing this.
Come on, man. Come on. Do what you gotta do.
Step out here, please. Step out of here.
You can get somebody else here.
Get out of the vehicle now before I make you get out of here.
And there you have it. You see that the officer says, well, there's no need to cuss. Like we've seen 1,000 times on these videos, all it takes is a little First Amendment protected speech that offends the delicate sensitivities of our blue line heroes, and then we get escalation. And worse than that, escalation that cannot be de-escalated. You see, if a situation is escalated justifiably because it got unexpectedly dangerous, maybe somebody pulled a gun, or maybe somebody pulled a knife, or maybe somebody did something crazy, that situation, once the scene is secure, can be cooled down. The right officer can get that situation under control and everyone can sort of chill out. But it is almost impossible to de-escalate a situation that was only escalated because of ego. So maybe we not only have a Fourth Amendment false arrest claim and a Fourth Amendment excessive force claim, but we might also have a First Amendment retaliation claim as well. But to be honest, I'm exhausted from all the constitutionaling I've done up to this point, so I'll let you guys decide if this was a First Amendment retaliation or not. In closing, as I've said many times before, I can't think of any situation, and I do mean that literally, that cannot be made worse by a poorly trained, undereducated, ego-driven police officer. Even if you believe that this officer had a legitimate concern, say that she was genuinely acting out of, multiple complaints about the misuse of handicap placards and the occupation improperly of handicap spaces, then what should she have done? Well, one, she should have understood the law, right? She should have at least understood the operation of the law that she was attempting to enforce, but she didn't. She should have asked a follow-up question, maybe wait, observe. She believed that Faulkner was doing something that she wasn't doing. And when Faulkner defended herself, the officer thought she was lying. And there really is no greater challenge to an officer's ego than if they think you are lying, because it becomes sort of a game to them to try to figure out how to catch you in that lie. It's something that insecure people who are good at gaslighting and that kind of thing do to make themselves feel better. And that's when the gaslighting and verbal judo become more dangerous than the weapons on a duty belt. Because in the absence of a firm understanding of the statute and constitutional principles guiding lawful authority, that ego becomes the authority. It's the only thing that matters. The proper response to this situation would have been to accept the explanation that Faulkner gave. Park a few rows over and watch. If grandma never shows up, you conduct another stop, an actual traffic stop this time, and you issue a citation because your investigation is complete. Then you have the opportunity to match the registration documents to the registration for the handicap placard, all that good stuff. But grandma did show up, and the officer by that point had already thrown her granddaughter to the ground. So what would have been a routine moment of discretion, a professional police officer, well-versed in the law, recognizing that she had no clear violation, turned into an assault on someone's body and their rights. And the worst part of this whole deal, and the part that will get lost in all this silliness, because this will become a conversation about a bunch of other things, including race, but this part will be the part that the police cannot avoid dealing with. This police officer turned the very person that she purported to protect into collateral damage for her ego. That poor lady, unable to walk, was forced to hobble across the parking lot alone, very likely full of anxiety, wondering what tragedy had befallen her family member, all because the police officer charged with protecting her had instead arrested the person who was going to give her a ride home. And what's almost comical about this situation to me is the haste with which the police department released this body cam. And we all know that they only do that when they think they're justified. And the sad part about this situation is that there's probably not a single person in that police department who believes at this moment that their officer was 100% wrong, but she was. And that's because there's probably not a single police officer anywhere on that department who knows the law as well as they know the feeling of being the cop who believes that they are the victim of contempt by the citizenry they're supposed to be serving. Mark my words. Ego-driven policing will be the eventual downfall of the very few good men and women who are left in law enforcement. And I would bet all of my money on the proposition that more people have lost their jobs, their freedom, and their lives to uncontrolled ego than to almost any other cause in the history of mankind. And that's really the lesson here. This may have started out being about a parking spot, but it quickly became something else. This became about not bending the knee and not knowing your place. Anyway, that's all for this one, guys. I just wanted to put it on your radar and kind of give you my take on it. I think it's atrocious. I think the police chief should be held accountable. I think this officer should be fired. And I really hope that somebody sues these people into oblivion. I'd like to invite you over to the Substack community. That is the best chance for you to interact with me if you're interested in doing that. If you're not, watch the video, comment, do your thing. But if you want to interact with me, I've kind of pulled back from the comments because I just don't have time to keep up with them. But Substack is absolutely free to join. It's a blog site. Sometimes we get into stuff that we talk about in the comments or that people bring up in the comments that's a little deeper than the actual video. And sometimes we talk about stuff that's completely unrelated to the video. But it's absolutely free to join. You can join on a paid tier if you want to, but that's only for people who want to support the channel monetarily. If you don't want to go to Substack, maybe you don't like reading or you just don't want to follow me to another platform, but you do want to support the channel monetarily, I'll leave my Venmo and PayPal links both here on the screen as well as in the description. Please remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment on the video. Check out some of the other videos on the channel and leave a comment on there as well. Until I see you again, take care. Always film your interactions with the police and keep your evidence to yourself.